Goeienaand, good evening, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world. And as you're aware, later this week, we're going to be having Reino de Beer on a live stream on this channel at 8 p.m. Johannesburg time. And obviously, I'll give you notification as to exactly which day that is. But the reason we're talking about Reino is because the appeal by Dlamini Zuma and the NCC was heard in the High Court yesterday. And some of the claims that Dlamini Zuma made was that the judgment by the court was a radical error, overreach, inexplicably, are some of the words that she used. This is the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs who's really in the wrong job, let's face it. Anyway, let's continue. Dlamini Zuma is applying for leave to appeal the ruling which declared 6 of the Alert Level 3 regulations invalid, even though these regulations were not in existence when the court heard the matter. These include the regulations pertaining to the limit of exercise, funerals, the closure of beaches and public parks, and the declaration of the contravention of certain disaster regulations as a criminal offence. In fact, talking about funerals, I'm going to show you a few video clips that have come out of a funeral in KwaMashu in KwaZulu-Natal that happened on Tuesday. Yeah, earlier today. And you can see social distancing out the window, party time, yes, tick that box. This is a funeral where they just completely ignore the so-called regulations. We're talking about the wider black African population. Okay, let's continue on. In what was regarded as a bombshell ruling, Gauteng High Court Judge Norman Davis on the 2nd of June granted the Liberty Fighters Network application to declare the regulations unconstitutional and therefore invalid. Dlamini Zuma sought leave to appeal from the High Court. On the 30th of June, Judge Davis granted her leave to appeal, but only for the blanket declaration of invalidity of the regulations governing the lockdown. He ordered that she had 10 days in which to amend 6 regulations which the court found to be irrational. Dlamini Zuma is now asking the SCA to allow her to appeal the ruling regarding the 6 regulations, while she indicated that she will also lodge her appeal on the blanket declaration of invalidity. Now, the point is that she had until earlier today, Tuesday, to do this, but she hasn't done it. But she's now outside the appeal time, but she's kind of suggesting that, well, middle finger to the court, I'm going to do it when I'm ready to do it. This is how the ANC government work. It is absolutely ridiculous. Let's continue. Dlamini Zuma is now asking the SCA to allow her to appeal the ruling regarding the 6 regulations, while she indicated that she will also lodge her appeal on the blanket declaration of invalidity. In her documents, Dlamini Zuma says there's a reasonable prospect that the SCA could find that the High Court erred, based on the following. 1. The Liberty Fighters Network failed to raise a valid constitutional attack. 2. The High Court strayed beyond the pleadings. 3. The Level 3 regulations were not placed before the court at the time of the hearing. 4. The High Court's rationality assessment of the 6 regulations were flawed. 5. The wholesale declaration of invalidity was not justified. And 6. The High Court orders are unduly vague. As I say, she's now outside the appeal time given by the court, but they don't care. This ANC government, it's a complete and utter disgrace. You know, really, the court should just reject any appeal because she didn't meet the time frame. If you or I hadn't met the time frame, they would just say, tough, you lose. Anyway, Dlamini Zuma's document said, the first and most fundamental error by the High Court is that it finds that the Level 3 regulations are unconstitutional. The court makes this finding even though these regulations were not yet promulgated when the court heard the matter. She went on to say, inexplicably, the court made recommendations that were yet to come into existence. On this basis of this radical error alone, the High Court order falls to be set aside. She said, Liberty Fighters Network founding affidavit contains sweeping statements on the disaster regulations' constitutionality. Her affidavit reads, it did not identify the regulations at which it was aimed or specify the grounds on which they were attacked. As a consequence of the respondent's failure to plead the constitutional attack with any degree of specificity, I was deprived of the opportunity to meaningfully respond to it. Dlamini Zuma says an example of the ruling's overreach is that the court effectively struck down the offence for evicting a person from their land or home during the Alert Level 3 period, without even considering the rationality of the prohibition on evictions during a state of national disaster. Another example is that the court has effectively struck down the offence of consuming alcohol at the place of sale, without any consideration at all of the rationality of the prohibition and the implications for enforcement. She said if those specific questions raised by the court had been pleaded, she would have been able to explain why they were justified. She said, I have done so in a separate litigation, challenging the disaster regulations, where the validity of the regulations was upheld. Dlamini Zuma is also asking the SCA to deal with the matter urgently. She said, there are for obvious reasons compelling considerations of high public interest that an appeal against this judgment be urgently heard and determined by this court. The disaster regulations, including the 6 regulations, drastically affect the lives of South Africans on a daily basis. If they are in breach of the Constitution, that needs to be determined as a matter of high urgency. If, on the other hand, they are constitutionally compliant and thus valid and binding, that too must be determined without delay. The judgment has sown confusion among the public as to the validity of the regulations and has created the impression of a constitutional crisis. Well, that's because you are just so incompetent, Dlamini Zuma, and corrupt. You know, that's what this is all about. Just typical. Par for the course for the ANC government. Anyway, she goes on to say, this is undesirable given the importance of compliance with the regulations in the face of the persistent threat posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, this is I'm becoming more and more concerned that this whole setup with the regulations is targeting the minority groups. I'm going to show you in a second series of videos of, as I said, of this funeral where social distancing was the least thing or the last thing on their minds, believe me. Stay healthy and entertained during the national lockdown. Sign up for the Lockdown Living newsletter. Alright guys, please remember to subscribe to be kept informed. Ring the bell for the updates. Please like this video, please share this video, and above all, please stay safe. Bye for now.